Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Here's a quotation for you to ponder. More students, but fewer teachers. Since 2009, Kansas schools have gained more than 19,000 students, but have 665 fewer teachers. Well, that's from the Kansas Center for Economic Growth. Here's another. Class sizes have increased, teachers and staff members have been laid off. That was from the New York Times this summer, talking about Kansas schools. And these quotations are typical of the sentiment in Kansas, that there were fewer teachers since Sam Brownback became governor, and that class sizes have exploded. So what has been the trend in Kansas school employment and pupil-teacher ratio? Well, here's the data, fresh from the Kansas State Department of Education. The first chart shows the number of employees, with the top line being the number of certified employees and the bottom line being the number of teachers. Now, it's a little difficult to see the changes because the changes are relatively small. But for the fourth consecutive year, the number of teachers in Kansas public schools is larger than for the year before. Also, the number of teachers has risen proportionally faster than enrollment, leading to declining pupil-teacher ratios. This chart shows that the pupil-teacher ratio has fallen in recent years. It has fallen slowly, to be sure, but it is falling after rising. Now, listening to Kansas school officials and many legislators, you'd think that Kansas schools had very few teachers left, and that students were struggling in huge classes. But these statistics from the Kansas State Department of Education show that school employment has rebounded, both in terms of the absolute number of teachers and certified employees, but also the ratios of pupils to these employees. Now, the situation with employment and enrollment is not the same in every school district. So I've created an interactive visualization that lets you examine the employment levels and ratios in Kansas school districts, and you can find that at wichitaliberty.org. But considering the entire state, two trends emerge. For the past 4 years, the number of teachers employed in Kansas public schools has risen. And since the number of teachers has risen proportionally faster than enrollment, the pupil-teacher ratio has fallen. The trend for certified employees is a year behind that of teachers, but the number of certified employees has also risen, and the ratio to pupils has mostly fallen. Now, public school advocates complain that class sizes in Kansas schools are rising. And I understand that the ratio of teachers to pupils is not the same statistic as class size. They measure different things. But if Kansas schools, considered as a whole, have rising teacher and certified employment levels that lead to decreasing pupil-to-teacher ratios, and if at the same time class sizes are increasing, well, I think we have to wonder about the management of our schools. Part of the problem we have is that the average voter is not very well informed about some of these issues. That means voters are susceptible to the pleadings of special interest groups. Last week, Kansas Policy Institute produced a survey asking registered voters in Kansas questions on the topic of school spending. And as in the past versions of surveys, we see that Kansans are either uninformed or misinformed on the level of school spending, and also on the direction of its change. The first two questions measured the level of knowledge of Kansas school spending. Question 1 asked, how much state funding do you think Kansas school districts currently receive per pupil per year from just the state of Kansas? And the most frequent response given by respondents was less than $4,000 per year. Nearly 2/3 thought funding from the state was less than $5,000 per year. Well, the correct answer is that for the most recent school year, Kansas state funding per student was $7,088, and that's estimated to rise to $8,604 for the current school year. And question 2 asked about funding from all sources. How much funding per pupil do you think Kansas School District currently receive from all taxpayer sources per year, including state, federal, and local taxpayers? Well, the most common answer given was less than $7,000, with 2/3 answering less than $10,000. Well, the correct answer is per pupil spending from all sources for the most recent school year was $12,960. The estimate for the current school year is $13,268. And question 3 asked about the change in school funding. Over the last 4 years, how much do you think total per pupil funding has changed? Well, 65%, that's nearly 2/3, thought spending had fallen over this period. Only 14% thought spending had risen, and only 7% thought it rose by more than 5%. Well, that last category holds the correct answer, which is 8.02%. Now, the findings of these 3 questions, which are that generally people are uninformed as to the level of school spending, that they are not able to produce estimates that are in the same ballpark as actual values, and are wrong on the direction of the change of school spending, well, these results are not surprising. Past versions of similar surveys in Kansas have produced similar results. And it's not just a Kansas problem, as similar findings are found across the nation. The important issue to public policy is this. No matter how much you think should be spent on public schools, most Kansas voters are not equipped with the correct information on which to base a decision. Now, here's what's really interesting. When people make major or even minor purchases, many will expend considerable effort researching the possibilities. When spending their own money, most automobile purchasers will want to get a good deal on a car that meets their needs and preferences. They will examine carefully the cars and options that are available. They may spend money to purchase buying advice from trusted sources. That's all human nature. But every 2 years, taxpayers spend on each Kansas public school student an amount that will buy a nice new car, around $26,000. And in 4 years, taxpayers spend enough on each student to buy a new luxury car. Now, the average taxpayer individually doesn't pay that much tax for schools, but collectively, we all do. And I don't think we're giving this spending much scrutiny. The economist Milton Friedman and his wife developed a table of the various ways that money may be spent. Category 1 in the table refers to you spending your own money on yourself. Category 2, that's when you spend your money on someone else. Category 3 refers to you spending someone else's money on yourself. And Category 4 is you spending someone else's money on still yet another person. Now, in which of these categories do you think money is spent most carefully? Well, I think most people would agree that that is in Category 1, when you are spending your own money on yourself. And where is there the least or lowest incentive to spend carefully? Well, that's in Category 4. And that is the category that holds most government spending. And Category 3 is especially dangerous, as that is when people try to use the coercive force of government to have other people's money spent on themselves. That describes the motivation of parents with children in public schools to have government spend more money on schools, whether it does any good or not. It describes the motivations of public school bureaucrats and why they want to spend more of your money on themselves. It describes the motivations of cronies at Wichita City Hall and the Wichita Metro Chamber of Commerce. They, too, want more of your tax money to spend on themselves. All of this is just more reasons why we need to remove as much economic activity as possible from the public sector and place it in the private sector, where we know that people spend most carefully.